All right. So I know I've talked a lot about the overall process because I wanted you to have a 10,000-foot view of the overall process. I also want you to understand the importance of just having good source control. So let's go ahead and have a new slide, and we'll say, we'll call this slide Advantages of Just Source Control. So you guys have been using TFS for source control already in code. You're just not using it for the database. So I'm going to ask you guys that just to see if you're still awake. You can type it in. Why do you guys use source control? Code sharing. Okay. So code sharing, right, where we don't have the latest of each other's work, right? Ron says tracking changes. That's absolutely right. Yep. So we can compare versions, right? We can say compare version 5 with version 10, and I can see exactly what happened in the last 3 updates of that stored procedure or that module to see exactly what changed and how that procedure or class or method has changed over time. Right. Yep. Rollback. Yep. A rollback mechanism. So this allows us to say, hey, I messed up, and now I need to go back to version 5. As version 6 and 7 are garbage or something like that, right? Yep, it gives us that. What else does it give us? Anything else? I've got one. It increases code visibility. If I want to know, hey, what did Alan write today? It allows me to see what work is being accomplished so that I can prepare a deployment schedule, or I can see how far Alan is in his projects. It also gives us a mechanism for code review. I can say, hey, my code is done. Go tell me if it's good or not, right? It also lets me have one version of the truth or a gold standard, right? So that I can say, hey, if it's not in source control, it doesn't exist. So if you guys make changes, you can change, but if I don't see it in source control, it doesn't affect me. Then you make a change and you're like, okay, this thing is beautiful, I love it. You check it in, and now everybody gets those changes, and they know that you've approved those changes. You know that that's suitable for the team to see, right? Okay, so those are great advantages of source control, and we definitely want that in our database, right? Okay, let's do a quick source control history. And then I'm going to tell you some source control best practices. Source control started with what we call Generation 0 source control. A popular version of that is SourceSafe. I don't know if you guys ever used Visual SourceSafe. People like SourceSafe because it was free, and so it was used a ton. But SourceSafe is kind of a problem because if I use SourceSafe, I had to check a module out and then edit it and then check it back in. So if I wanted to change a VB file, I would check it out and I would make all of my changes, and then I would make sure my changes were done, and then I would check it into source control. But we had all kinds of problems with that. Like if I checked a module out and then I went home for the day, and then like I called in sick the next day at work and somebody needed to edit it, they had to figure out if they wanted to undo my checkout, in which case I might lose my changes, or if they wanted to like hunt me down and call me and get me to check back in again. And so with SourceSafe, we found that we spent a ton of time worried about object locking and security and not a ton of time actually writing code. And the main problem with it was that we had to check out first, edit it, and then check in. And that was just cumbersome, and it just wasn't very fun at all. So this next generation, Generation 1, is like Subversion, EFS. Right? This said, edit, then check in. So there's no locking mechanism. You could edit all the modules that you wanted to edit, and then when you checked in, it would go back into source control. If the module looked the same when you checked out, when you went to check back in, it just allowed you to check back in and overwrite any module that was already there. I mean, it saved it in history, but it didn't yell at you or squawk at you. But let's say that I checked it out, I edited it, and then when I go to check back in, it turns out that Alan had already checked it out and made a change and checked back in the time I had it out, right? Well, what would happen is I would edit the module, and I would never know that Alan was editing the same module. Alan checks back in, fine. Alan's check-in is easy. I go to check back in, and it flags me a warning and says, hey, you need to merge your changes with Alan's changes because Alan checked in first. So then I have to like think about what Alan did and maybe call Alan and see how I could fold his changes in with my changes and then get it all checked in appropriately, which is fine. But if I want to do frequent check-ins, that merging would really get in my way of my train of thought, right? I didn't want to have to merge all the time. So that brings us to generation 2, get Bitbucket, Mercurial. Okay. At generation 2 source control, the major player in this source control is get. And get is super, it's been adopted like crazy, right? So what makes get so interesting? Well, in get, what you have is you have a central source control repository, and then you have your local source control here, right? So this right here could be your local dev box. And you have a copy of source control there also. So this is like a two-way street here, right? Changes from central can go up, your changes from local can go up, and changes from central can come down. Now why is that cool? Well, on generation 2, I can edit code here, and check in, and the only thing I'm doing when I check in is I'm checking to my local repository on my local dev box, which means I don't have to merge my changes in with everybody else just because I checked into source control. So I can edit, check in, edit, check in, edit, check in, and never have a problem. Then when I want to merge into central, I push those changes, or I can ask central to pull my changes into them. I push those changes into the central repository, and then I deal with merge all at once, and I have the overhead of merge all at one time. So why is that cool? It allows me to use source control for all of these things here, right, this whole list, without having to interact with my other teammates until I'm ready to release a gold standard, and I know that it's really, really good code, right? So this is why Git has become so popular, and this is why teams love it. All right. So why did I tell you that? Well, you use a shared database for development, and we'll do that right here. Problems with the shared database. You're basically down to generation 0. Because if we all use the same development database, I have to go to my teammates and say, hey, don't touch that stored procedure because I'm editing it. Or, hey, don't mess with that table because I'm playing with it, right? And that, all those problems that we had with SourceSafe resurface when we have a shared database. So really, a best practice for source control to work really well is every developer has their own dev database. And that way, I can change stored procedures, I can edit things, I can keep things updated, and I don't have to interact with the rest of the team until I'm ready to interact with the rest of the team. So that has a lot of strength and power there, and it allows me to finish my work without the overhead and burden of making sure that my code is in a releasable state all the time. And it allows me to be more aggressive in the work that I do. So I would, one thing I would do is I would work on getting every dev their own database. Now, what stops us from doing that? Usually what stops us is a very large dev database. Like if our dev databases are like 1 terabyte or something like that, we don't want to like back up 1 terabyte, we don't want to restore 1 terabyte, and we don't want to copy 1 tera on all these dev machines, right? So really what we should work on is getting our dev database really small. What benefits do we have of having a small dev database? Well, one, we can back up and restore quickly. Two, we can put copies everywhere. Three, our tests run faster because we're testing a smaller subset of data. Four, our code runs faster in debugging. Five, our queries run faster. And six, our workstations are faster to set up. These are some of our best practices right here. Okay. So anyway, try to get those dev databases small. Try to get everybody using their own dev database. And you'll have a much higher chance that you'll be successful using source control with each other. But if you use source control over a shared database, you're still doing object locking. And that's no fun. And it slows down development. And it just makes the environment not super fun to code in.